Attorney General Pam Bondi is already working to end the weaponization of government, secure our border, and make America safe again. Look at the power! And as for illegals, Bondi has directed the DOJ, to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. Look at that, that's huge.
I'm not condemning the people that are working FBI cases in Iowa or any of the other 49 states because they're doing their job.
Pam Bondi takes the reins at the DOJ, and she's not playing around. On day one, she's already released a new memo. Fox News has an exclusive on this, and they're going to detail what is inside. One big highlight, she's forming a weaponization committee to go after and find all these people, including the hack prosecutors that we covered here on this channel, like Fannie and Bragg and Tish and anyone else who broke the law, corrupted their power, and went after the president and J6ers, and by proxy, you and me, okay, calling us MAGA extremists and homegrown domestic violent extremists and RVEs and DMVEs and all these things. Now she's going to get to the bottom of it. But before we look at the memo, let's see explicitly what happened today when everybody was in the Oval Office. There's the president himself, joined by Clarence Thomas, his wife, Pam Bondi, her husband, and of course the president himself, swearing her in. This is a big day. Here is how it sounded today.
I, Pamela Bondi, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully.
And that I will well and faithfully.
Discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter.
Discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right, so Pam Bondi takes the helm, and it is a great day indeed. Now, she didn't play around. She's like, where's my desk at? Give me a pen and give me my order. Chad Gilmartin posted this. He's working at the Justice Department, looks like, with Trump 47. What's up, Chad? Shout out. Says, Attorney General Pam Bondi is already working to end the weaponization of government, secure our border, and make America safe again. Look at the power. Sign it, Pam. Beautiful. And she's a lefty. Yes. It gets better by minute. Incredible. All right, so she's signing orders. There's Emil Bove standing right there. And oh, it felt so good just to scribble that out. Incredible. What a day. We're taking over lefties too. Incredible. Here's what the memo said. So Fox News got an exclusive. They said Bondi's DOJ Day 1 directives: fight weaponization of justice, eliminate cartels, lift death penalty ban, which we can have a conversation about that one. But first two are great. So it says here, Attorney General Pam Bondi will issue several major directives on her first day leading the Justice Department, including orders to combat the weaponization of the legal system. More details on that. That is what we're talking about. Make prosecutors seek the death penalty when appropriate, and work with the Department of Homeland Security to, quote, completely eliminate the cartels and transnational criminal organizations. Fox News has learned. Now, they exclusively obtained the memos, which I wish they would just post them. Can you just post these things? But she was confirmed by the Senate Tuesday night. She got sworn in, as we just saw today. She issued a directive regarding zealous advocacy. Bondi said DOJ attorneys and their responsibilities include aggressively enforcing criminal laws passed by Congress, but also vigorously defending presidential policies and actions on behalf of the United States against legal challenges. Now, the discretion afforded Justice Department attorneys, she wrote, with respect to those responsibilities does not include latitude to substitute their personal political views or judgments for those that prevailed in the election. In other words, prosecutor Democrat hacks, you're on notice, okay? Stop inserting yourselves into the law like you've been doing for the last however many decades. When DOJ attorneys refuse to faithfully carry out their role, for example, by refusing to advance good faith arguments or declining to sign briefs, it undermines the constitutional order and deprives the president of the benefit of his lawyers. That's you. And if he's not getting a benefit, you're gone. Bondi, in her memo, states that any Justice Department attorney who declines to sign a brief, refuses to advance, or otherwise delays or impedes the Justice Department's mission will be subject to discipline and potentially termination. You're fired. Bondi is set to also, watch this, establish the Weaponization Working Group, which will review the activities of all law enforcement agencies over the past 4 years to identify instances of politicized justice. The working group's first reviews will include prosecutions against Trump led by the illegitimate so-called special counsel Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, attorney from New York, Manhattan, who was prosecuting Trump on the so-called election interference case with Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen in front of Judge Merchan. He's under scrutiny. Tish James, who brought the civil fraud case against the Trump organization for the private contracts he entered with the banks and got like a $500 million judgment against him that's on appeal, and her team got scolded by the Court of Appeals. She's under scrutiny. That's all getting roped into this. Who brought the civil fraud case against Trump and his family. So they're getting listed. Now, I'm sure that Fannie Willis is going to also be included in there. Hopefully they didn't forget about Big Fannie. All right, we got Jack Smith, we got Alvin, we got Tish. Where's Fannie Willis? And Nathan Wade. The working group will also review any potential abuse regarding January 6th, the FBI's targeting of Catholic Americans, the Justice Department's targeting of parents at school board meetings, and the abuses of the Freedom of Access to Clinic entrances, or the FACE Act. Meanwhile, Bondi will also end the moratorium on federal executions in order that federal prosecutors at the DOJ seek the death penalty when appropriate, specifically with a focus on violent drug trafficking crimes. Bondi also ordered that the Justice Department reevaluate instances of the prior administration electing not to seek the death penalty. Bondi's also expected to rescind any DOJ policies that are not sufficiently in line with Trump's death penalty order, right? And Trump gets a little bit like death penalty heavy. I think during the campaign, he was like, if you get caught with like a dime bag, you're dead, right? You're just executed immediately. He's like, no drugs, death to drug dealers, fast executions, no trials. Everybody's like, what? Anyways, but he's making a point, which I can appreciate. The move represents a major reversal for the Biden DOJ. They issued a moratorium on executions. Biden commuted the sentences, right? See, this is where I think you can have a real problem, is when there were 37 of the 40 criminals on death row, which is a weird, inconsistent argument. It's like, wait a minute. So you agree with the death penalty in some instances? So you'll let other people die, then commuted the sentences for some of the most vile people, right? These R's, these chomos, these murderers on death row and all these things. In other words, there was finality in those cases. They were expecting the death penalty to come. That was due process. That was justice. And Biden commuted that, which in my opinion was taking it away from them. So it's a complex issue, but let's go to the cartels. She says Bondi is directing the DOJ to work closely with the Department of Homeland Security and other federal partners to completely eliminate the threats of cartels and transnational organizations. When we're talking about transnational organizations here, we're talking about organizations that go across multiple countries. I know it's confusing these days. Transnational pre-2025 Trump's inauguration could have meant a whole different thing. This means, just to be clear, it spans across multiple different countries. Okay, just to be clear. Says Bondi plans to reimagine charging priorities relating to those cases in order to ensure that law enforcement resources are focusing on dismantling the foundational operational capacity of these cartels. Saying here, the Justice Department is expected to temporarily suspend some bureaucratic approvals and review. So just do it. Prioritize speedy prosecutions of the accused, especially those charged with terrorism and other things. Bondi said the joint task force called Vulcan, super cool name, which was created to destroy MS-13, and Joint Task Force Alpha, equally cool, which was created to fight human trafficking, would be further empowered and evaluated to the Office of the AG. Those missions are expected to expand, specifically Vulcans, with a new focus on destroying Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang that got taken today. I think 50 people got arrested today. Also on the cartel front, Bondi is directing the DOJ Office of Legal Policy to find legislative reforms to target equipment designed to make fentanyl and add this other drug to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act. It's called xylazine, which is a new one. So it says, and as for illegals, Bondi has directed the DOJ, to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. Look at that. That's huge. Bondi has directed the DOJ to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. No more funds for you. Bondi has also directed the DOJ, that's huge, because that's Chicago, cities in Colorado, I think Denver, LA, many of them. She's also saying the DOJ must identify and evaluate all funding agreements with NGOs that provide support to illegals. She's also directing litigating components of the DOJ to investigate instances of jurisdictions that are impeding law enforcement, like governors who are holding illegals in their roofs, and directing they be prosecuted when necessary. Now, meanwhile, Bondi will create a new joint task force focused on holding Hamas accountable for its crimes against Jews during its terror attack. She's going to prosecute them in the United States, Hamas people in their caves or their holes, sewers over there. What? Anyways, the task force will also achieve justice for victims. The task task force will pursue criminal charges where applicable against Hamas, I guess, seek the arrest and the extradition of Hamas, and investigate anti-Semitism in the U.S. She's also directing the FBI to staff the Joint Terrorism Task Force, those with significant experience in investigating terrorism. Beyond those, she's also directing the termination of all DEI programs at the department by March 15th. She also is demanding the removal of all references to DEI in training programs, specifically ending the emphasis on race and sex-based criteria and refocused on hiring solely on merit. She's also going to work with the Department of Ed to ensure that educational institutions receiving federal grants are adhering to fair admission practices. Longtime prosecutor, Florida AG, saying, I'm not going to use my position to target anybody. We're going to end the weaponization. We're going to have one tier of justice for all. We also saw that acting general deputy AG issued a memo to the acting FBI director on Friday to terminate FBI employees. And then after the directive on Tuesday, FBI babies tried to sue the DOJ so that their names wouldn't be released because they didn't want to be identified as working on the J6 cases because they used to be so proud of it. The FBI field office on X used to post every day, J6 are arrested, or give you an update. This person got sentenced to 15 years or whatever. So proud of all of their work, signing the affidavits and their probable cause statements and submitting their search warrants and all the things. Now suddenly they don't want to be talked about at all. Don't look at us. No. Meanwhile, they're spying on all of us with their FISA search warrants and so on and raiding Trump's house. So very little sympathy for them. But here is a letter that came out from Emil Bove. And this came over from this guy at FX Reagan on X. And he's a former police officer, retired FBI agent and SWAT team, former corporate security executive, now full-time author and licensed PI. Check him out, fxregan.com. He's got a little bit of a different take in his post. He says, turns out he's a little sympathetic with the 5,000 FBI agents, saying some of the large conservative posters on here, maybe like, us, will tell you things without having any experience on what they pretend to be experts about. In other words, maybe we shouldn't go fire all these people and they should stay, which obviously I disagree with, but we appreciate him sharing this news with us. This is what Emil posted, acting DAG's memo to FBI employees. He says, okay, colleagues, this is from Emil Bove, acting deputy AG. I write with additional information regarding the memo that I sent to the FBI's acting director on January 31st, 2025, saying you're all done. Multiple times during the week of January 27th, I asked the FBI's acting leadership to identify the core team in DC responsible for the investigation related to J6. The purpose of the requests was to permit the Justice Department to conduct a review of those particular agents' conduct pursuant to Trump's executive order concerning weaponization in the prior administration. FBI acting leadership refused to comply. That insubordination necessitated, among other things, the directive in my January 31st memo to identify all agents assigned to investigations relating to J6. In light of acting leadership's refusal to comply with the narrower requests, the written directive was intended to obtain a complete data set that the Justice Department can reliably pare down to the core team that will be the focus of the weaponization review pursuant to Trump's executive order. The memo stated unambiguously, and I stand by these words, that the information requested was intended, quote, to commence a review process. We're just getting started. That will be used to, quote, determine whether any additional personnel actions are necessary. So we're just gathering information. Stop being so dramatic. Gosh. Here's what Emil says. Let me be clear. No FBI employee who simply followed orders and carried out their duties in an ethical manner with respect to J6 investigations is at risk of termination or other penalties. The only individuals who should be concerned about the process initiated by me on January 31st in my memo are those who acted with corrupt or partisan intent, those who blatantly defied orders from department leadership, or who exercised discretion in weaponizing the FBI. There is no honor in the ongoing efforts to distort that simple truth or protect culpable actors from scrutiny on these issues, which have been politicized by the Bureau, harmed its credibility, and distracted the public from the excellent work being done every day. If you have witnessed such behavior, says Emil, I encourage you to report it through the appropriate channels. In closing, I am extremely grateful for the service and sacrifices of those in the FBI's ranks who have done the right thing for the right reasons. You will be empowered to do justice as we work together to make America safe again. I very much look forward to continuing that work with you. Thanks, Emil. Here's CNN's reaction to Pam Bondi now taking the helm at the DOJ.
Bondi is getting ready to take serious action regarding cases brought against President Trump. What can you tell?
Well, look, she's walking into this agency that is in crisis. You just mentioned the firings of agents and prosecutors who worked on cases related to Trump and the riot on January January 6th. So she has an opportunity here to maybe change the tone, but she has laid out in a series of memos efforts that she wants to undertake to, quote, curb the weaponization of the Justice Department. Now, these include reviews of the cases Trump has faced, including the 2 federal criminal cases, one into the alleged mishandling of classified documents, the other into election subversion, the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal case, the so-called hush money case where he was convicted, as well as a civil case against Trump brought by the New York Attorney General that resulted in a $450 million judgment. Now, look, it's unclear if she is beginning these steps to sort of appease the boss. We know he's very unhappy about the fact that he faced these investigations. Or is this part of something more serious, potentially? Is this an initial step in trying to potentially prosecute some of the folks who were involved, specifically in the federal investigations? You cannot underestimate the distrust and the bitterness that Trump's criminal lawyers, many of whom now are going to work in the Justice Department, feel towards those who are involved, especially in those federal investigations.
Yes, because they represented Trump against those people. They were on the other side. They had a front row seat to it. They have notes about it because they saw it and witnessed it. Okay, they know the inside of the corruption better than we do or could ever possibly know. And there's clearly collusion between all of them. They were flying back to the White House. Fannie was meeting with Kamala. There were notes from Nathan Wade about the J6 committee. The list goes on and on. Alvin Bragg and the rest of them had Matthew Colangelo come from the White House to join them. So how about a RICO case for them and Jack Smith and the collusion with Tim Tebow and that FBI agent who is now back in the news? Our friend Chuck Grassley came out with a new one, posted this week, said, Grassley underscores more misconduct in the Arctic frost investigation. He is explaining there's another email that he has released and it looks like this. Well, let's see what Chuck Grassley says in his statement. He wrote, all right, look, today I come to the floor to speak about a New York Times article that came out talking about our oversight. Now, in that article, they said FBI emails released on Thursday, the same ones we talked about, showed that agents and officials followed standard procedure. Okay, so the New York Times came like, no, there's no corruption. He said, what? The article written by these two from the New York Times, Grassley said, can be summed up like this: a big wet kiss to the politically biased leadership within the FBI. And now we know why that is, because the New York Times and Politico and a lot of these other entities were getting paid by the government. So he says, okay, so their article responding to the new emails, like, no, it's just standard business, says the New York Times. He says, whatever, you guys are just sloppy and disgusting, slobbering all over each other. Last week, Grassley says, Johnson and I made public FBI records that showed a snapshot into the origin of the Jack Smith elector case against Trump. It came from records that included a February 14, 2022 email from Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Tebow, the FBI agent, to his subordinate agent, Michelle Ball. He started it. He said the email is elector matter, right? It was all his idea. Now, my office has been told that Tebow handpicked subordinate agents, including Michelle and Jamie Garman, 2 FBI agents who are both referenced in the documents, to conceal his role as the initiating agent, okay? Because he has a record of being anti-Trump. So he's sitting around at home just concocting this scheme to frame Trump. I work at the FBI. I can frame anybody I want. What do I care? We've done it multiple times. We did it in 2016. We did it in 2020. I'll just do it again. So we can just rig the election. CIA did it in 2020. No one cared. So he then creates this thesis and picks other people he can funnel it through that don't have as strong of a record of being TDS demented. So now in the 2022 email, Tebow says, here is draft opening language we discussed, as his concoction continues. Attached to that email, says Grassley, is a Word document titled Elector. That Word document, when you open it, it contains information that became part of the predicating document that would later be approved to open the case. They called it codenamed Arctic Frost. When opening the Word document, it says author, Timothy Tebow. It also says last modified by Timothy Tebow. Now, I'll be publicly releasing today a new email, says Grassley, that was sent from Tebow to Michelle Ball and Jamie Garman on March 1. In the email, the FBI agent says, Tebow, to add, we'll come by to discuss. A document was attached to the email with language to be added to the Arctic Frost document opening up the investigation. The document attached to the email lists the author and the modifier, and as you guessed it, it's Tebow, the FBI guy. The document itself is titled Arctic Frost, and it adds President Trump as a criminal subject to the investigation. He did it. Notably, the document then lists Chairman Durbin's and his investigative report on Trump to help justifying to adding Trump, yet fails to use, Grassley says, my report, which provides much needed context. So this FBI agent takes a Democrat's, ignores Grassley's report, copies and pastes the whole thing, shoves it in there and says, this is how we can go get Trump. Grassley comes out. He's, what? Now the New York Times Times article said the FBI's records that we released to Johnson and Grassley, they said showed that agents and officials followed standard procedure. What? Grassley says that totally ignores the facts and the evidence. He says the FBI's rules even say this. Section 7.7.1 in the FBI's Domestic Investigations Operations Guide, he says essentially the FBI manual, is titled Opening Documentation. That rule shows the workflow approval that makes clear that supervisors are to approve work provided to them. In other words, the intent of this rule, based on its plain text, is that subordinate agents provide work product to supervising agents for the approval. Should there be any doubt, look no further than this other section titled No Self-Approval Rule, right? You can't write a report and say, this is amazing, let's investigate. Why do you think we should investigate? Because I wrote it. That rule says an approval officer, official, and the rule uses the word supervisor to define this person. A person may not self-approve his or her own work or activity. An independent evaluation and approval of these activities must be obtained, including the opening and closing of any assessment or predicated investigation. Then the rule says, in the event an FBI employee errantly conducts a self-approval, the approval is considered substantial non-compliance, and you must document this fact that you opened up a case and approved it yourself. Moreover, another FBI document defines the general roles and privileges of supervisors as this. Supervisor assigns leads and does other things. None of this says a supervisor like Thibault is allowed to draft and open a case and approve it for themselves. Can't do it. And he did it. And FBI rules, 3 of them it looks like, say don't do it. And if you do it, it's substantial non-compliance. It's a problem. Based on the facts and evidence that Johnson and Grassley have obtained, and based on the FBI's own rule, Thibault essentially self-approved his own case. He violated the FBI's rules. And so accordingly, Arctic Frost, as they codenamed Trump's case, was defective from the very start, not only from a political infection standpoint, but also because of substantial non-compliance with the FBI. Now, at this point, right, even if you say nothing else about Thibault and how much he hates Trump and what an operative he is for the FBI to create this stuff, even if he was just like a normal dude, you still can't write and approve your own reports. At this point, is the New York Times simply an FBI stenographer and propagandist parroting FBI lies? Asks Grassley. Yes, Chuck, they are. And they're probably paying them too. As with most of the information in the leaks the FBI has laundered through Goldman, the truth is the opposite of the FBI and the New York Times. Does the Times truly believe that it's normal for an assistant special agent in charge to prepare case predication for the opening of an investigation and then feed it to a street agent? So in other words, he handed it back down to them. Like he wrote it, handed it back down, then they gave it back to him, and then he approved it. Is it normal for him to write everything and send it to them and then they send it back for approval? Is it normal for them to do that? And is it normal for them to ignore sourcing that counteracts the predication they so badly want to manufacture? Is it normal for an assistant special agent in charge to post, here it is, anti-Trump social media post under his true name and title when he's overseeing the most politically sensitive investigations at the FBI? The guy was like nuts. He's on like Facebook like MAGA. Is it normal for an FBI agent in charge like Thibault, responsible for this, to be forced to resign because he was too partisan? People found out and he had to go. And then to be found to have violated the Hatch Act for the same partisanship. He started the whole thing. Seems to this senator that the New York Times has become the paid publicist of senior members of the FBI. And of course, they're hacks there. An unethical quid pro quo of pushing their narratives in exchange for publishing false narratives. On the occasion of the latest article as mouthpiece for the nameless FBI sources, Grassley says, I invite the New York Times editorial board to undertake its own investigation of one-sided law enforcement information leaked to him from FBI employees. Otherwise, the New York Times is inherently questionable. Thank you, Chuck. Absolutely true. All of that is accurate. Let's take a look at the email and then we'll see what Grassley had to say. You can see this was sent back on March 1st, 2022, and it went to Michelle Ball and to Jamie Rosalind Garman. 2 people maybe still work at the FBI. He sent this email to them. Arctic Frost 1. To add, we'll come by to discuss ... Don't want to put that in writing. You open up the document and guess who wrote it? Seen down here, bottom right on your screen. Timothy Thibault, right there. Author, last modified, Timothy Thibault. Don't you hate that metadata? He didn't even scrub the metadata. What kind of an FBI agent is he? So you see, he writes all of this, right? This is his little report, little addendum, says, here's the relevant info. Trump conspired with others, named and unnamed, to provide knowing statements. Those actions by Trump was part of a campaign to coerce Mike Pence. This is the beginning. This is where it all started, from this one nut. And then he fed it to his lower level agents, and then they fed it back up to him, and he approved it and launched the whole thing. Can't do do it. So here they continue to write, on November 7th, media outlets declare Joe Biden the winner. Then Trump, right? All of this then gets parlayed and copy and pasted right into Jack Smith's report. According to Rosen's testimony, they tried to present a plan. The DOJ was advising legislators. And so Trump, right? He urged legislators to overturn this. And then he just continues, right? So he started it. So this is like his little midnight thing. You're like, you get like those, you're like, oh, I'm feeling really creative tonight. Yeah, I'm just gonna like write this. It's like flowing, baby. You just get out of the shower, like brain's cleared out. Like, yeah, it's perfect. I should go to bed, but no, I'm jamming. He's like jamming. Sends it out. He says, oh, this is so good. This is even before ChatGPT, now it's like, wow. So Electoral College refers to ... He's gonna finish it out. And that's gonna be the indictment of Trump ultimately by this corrupt FBI agent, in my opinion, who was trying to siphon this back through his lower level subordinate agents and then self-approve it in violation of the FBI rules. And they all ran with it. Everybody else who saw this come through thought it was great. Went up to Merrick Garland, presumably, I would guess, talked to Joe about it. Maybe he didn't. We don't still know what happened there. But he says, sure, prosecute him. Same type of garbage happens with the Mar-a-Lago case. Jack Smith comes in, absorbs it all, leads those cases into the gutter. So let's listen to a little bit of Chuck Grassley.
Now, what Patel is all about by President Trump appointing him to the FBI director is simply to see that none of this stuff that I've discussed with you and in previous speeches on the floor of the United States Senate ever happens again, and that the FBI is going to be a law enforcement agency and not a political weaponization organization. And I say that about the people that are on the 7th floor of the Hoover FBI building. I'm not condemning the people that are working FBI cases in Iowa or any of the other 49 states because they're doing their job, but they should have the full support of the 7th floor of the building and not being concerned about prosecuting a former president of the United States, now a president reelected as the 47th president of the United States.
All right, so man, Chuck Grassley, or Chuckley, was very, very agitated, as you can see, and rightfully so, doing the distinction between the 7th floor and the boots on the ground, all that stuff. Well, we remember those guys were the ones who raided Trump's house, kicked in the doors of J6ers and more, but Pam Bondi, Kash Patel will be here to clean it out.